back to that in a moment. But before I leave this topic, I also want to tell you about a trial that was conducted, because I don't like basing a decision just on one data set, especially data sets from Arkansas. So we've got some data now from Tennessee, we have some data from Arkansas. And one of the registrants this past year funded some research to look at the volatility of Roundup Power-Max, as well as some other another Roundup formulation in these low tunnel trials. And this is a slide provided to me by Dr. Dan Reynolds of Mississippi State University. What Dr. Reynolds did is, he summarized 11 trials across the U.S. And I want to share with you the summary of those 11 trials, because that all of a sudden begins to give us, what, 12, 13, 14. You see what happens when you begin to see similar results. So Dr. Reynolds summarized this research, and this is what we call these low tunnel trials, where we introduce a flat of soil, it volatilizes off the flat of soil, and what we did here is we looked at how far it moved. And Extendamax is going to be this pink, orange, whatever color that we have here, this bottom color. And I want you to quickly look. We saw 5% damage out to 5 feet when we treated this flat of soil with Extendamax. When we added Extendamax plus PowerMax, it was approximately 9 feet, almost 10 feet. We take Extendamax plus Durango, and it goes out to about 17 feet. And actually, I'll tell you this today, those curves are statistically different. He assessed that. So we have significantly increased the volatility of Dicamba across 12, 13 trials now with the addition of glyphosate to the tank.
Dr. Nothsworthy, what's Durango?
Durango is a dimethylamine salt of glyphosate. It's one that is actually manufactured and produced by now Corteva, once Dow AgroSciences. So this is another glyphosate. I apologize. This is another glyphosate formulation that is commercially available. This is just looking at different salts of glyphosate. So the take home here also is that the salt of glyphosate also can have a strong influence on the degree of volatilization.
Dr. Nothsworthy,
yes.
One quick before you leave that. Was Extendamax the only formulation you used of Dicamba by itself?
In this trial, yes. Dr. Mueller has looked at Ingenia, and Dr. Mueller tells me he has the same effect with Ingenia. And guys, if there's any questions, and we can get seriously through this, stop, and I'd rather look at some of these slides and answer these questions as we have the slide up. So with that, also I just wanted to point out, not all of you probably have looked at the labels, but every label now has a section called tank mixing instructions. And the first part of that tank mixing instructions on the Extendamax and Ingenia label says, auxin herbicides such as Dicamba have the potential to volatilize in lower pH spray mixtures. Knowing the pH of your spray mixture and making the appropriate adjustments to avoid a low pH spray mixture, example, pH less than 5, can reduce the potential for volatilization to occur. Now, it goes on further and it says, talk to your local agricultural consultant, extension agent, or Bayer representative for recommendations to prevent low pH spray mixtures. I'm going to tell you today, don't call the Division of Agriculture, okay? Because folks, we haven't done the research. There's a lot of tank mixes that are out there on the Extendamax website and the Ingenia website. The only thing that I've looked at today is this glyphosate. So, even though the label asks you to call your local extension agent, call your Bayer representative, call someone else in terms of have them tell you how the pH is influenced by each of these additives. All I will tell you today is the EPA, as well as the Arkansas State Plant Board, they do, you require droplet testing. You require droplet testing for Dicamba products, for other products. There is no requirement for volatility testing for any tank mix. And I've just sat here and told you today, when you start mixing products together, it impacts volatility, or can impact volatility. Not required. One thing is for certain, glyphosate increases the volatility of Dicamba. That's what the research says. I'll show you one other study here that we had some volatility with glyphosate. This was Extendamax plus Quadris, Roundup Power-Max. We treated this area here. We also treated the same area in a 20-acre field adjacent to this. We pulled out the PowerMax. I've talked about this where we use Quadris as a tracer. I do not have my air samples back on this. The only thing that I'm going to state on this study at this point is, if you look at the blue, this area here, I'm going to disregard this. This was water movement, dicamba movement in water. If we just look at the blue here to the north and to the east, we damaged 0.96 acres where we didn't have glyphosate in the tank. We had glyphosate in the tank and we damaged 2.6 acres. We increased the volatility of that product. Now, one thing I indicated when I was at the board is Dr. Mueller is trying to run these samples for me, but we also, one thing I haven't mentioned is we had another study, and I want to share with you something today, another study that we conducted. And one thing that's been brought up, and it's been mentioned to me time and time again by various individuals is, Dr. Nothsworthy, this isn't volatility. This is suspension of spray particles. So you go out here and you treat an acre and you've got suspended spray particles over that acre and they're staying suspended there for, I don't know, a day, 2 days, 3 days, and they're eventually moving off. Well, folks, I'll tell you, high school physics tells you that that's not possible, okay? But that has been stated time and time again to me. These particles are staying suspended, and can particles stay suspended? Absolutely. But can they stay suspended right over where I'm standing today with a 5-mile-per-hour Denny Stokes? No, they're going to move, okay? They're going to move, and they're going to move off target. So what we did is, to test this, we went in and we took a labeled dicamba. I'm not going to tell you, we just took a labeled dicamba, a labeled glyphosate, and I took a tracer. I'm not going to tell you, but we just took a tracer. And I added a tracer to that tank. And we made an application where we sprayed a field. And when we sprayed that field, I also had petri dishes out here where I was able to really quantify the fact that hopefully we got our rates correct. And we're able to measure dicamba and measure this tracer that I placed in the tank. And at the time of the study, the wind was coming almost directly out of the southeast. So for that reason, I went, and a half an hour after spraying, I put an air sampler in the center of this study, and I put an air sampler 50 feet in the downwind direction, 50 feet from the corner. Now, we switched this out. We had an air sampler 24 to 48, 48 to 72, and let's look at the results. I got these samples back from last night, and at 1:30 this morning, I put this slide together because I thought it was important. I thought it was important. And here's what we saw. We had dicamba